Welcome into the second season of the McKee Sports Playoff Podcast. I am your host, CEO, and founder of McKee Sports, Vince McKee. Tonight, joining me, it is the crew that you guys know and love from all 10 weeks of the regular season, your broadcast team, Cole McDaniel, the Italian Stallion, Dominic Clary, and Northeast Ohio's most eligible bachelor, Brandon Soeder Penner. Guys, welcome.
Well, can we start off by saying I don't think that Brandon's eligible?
Not quite, but I appreciate the intro, Vince.
Yeah, no problem, man. I had to give you some love right from the top. Guys, as you recall from last year, we really love doing this show. All of us have stuff that we do all week long. Cole has a Buckeye podcast. Cole and I have an NFL podcast. Dom has pretty much half the channel now with about 19 different podcasts.
So many.
Yeah, we have a lot going on, but this is the one I truly feel the four of us probably enjoy the most. It's a short sample. We only do this about 3 or 4 weeks, but we love doing this, and we're happy to bring it to you. I'm going to start off tonight by saying it seems to me, fellas, that it wasn't that long ago over the summer. We got together, I think, 3 different times, maybe once in June, May, and July, right? So it seems like we were just on the deck trying to piece everything together, and here we are, right? It's just amazing how quick this regular season has to take everybody beyond the wall here, the fourth wall, as we always say. We'll break down the fourth wall. Just to give you guys a little story real quick to start us off, we have interns. You guys have seen them. We have interns here at McKee Sports like crazy. Our intern night is one of the biggest things we do. It gives us a chance to go face-to-face with the new crew, see who's going to make it, really, really put a name with a face, and get to know these young, men and women. Well, folks, I don't know if you remember July 22nd as we do, but Northeast Ohio was hit with a major, major storm that night. July 22nd, we had a full house of interns. Lights went out, power went out. It could have been a horrible omen for the season, but they've always said if it rains on your wedding day, you have an amazing marriage. Well, if it rains and storms and the lights go out on intern day, you have an amazing intern class. So before we go any further, just want to shout out our intern class. We really loved working with you guys. All right, that being said, I am ready to talk some high school football. How about you, fellas?
Let's get after it.
Let's do it.
Or as Dom said in our last broadcast, let's get this bread right before we went back on air for a second.
Let's get this bread, baby. I say that more often than you guys could imagine.
I got to say, too, the best thing is when a game, like my game, would go to halftime about 5 minutes or so before your halftime went, or if there was a long timeout or whatever, and it would give me a chance to listen to a little bit of it. I enjoyed the heck out of it. Honestly, from the bottom of my heart, guys, you did a phenomenal job. Nobody does it as good as you guys do. I've heard that from people. I've heard that from other stations. So take that as a compliment. That being said, though, let's talk about it because your schedule this year was a buzzsaw of talents, right? Mm-hmm. So question number 1, we're going to go around the board. We'll go Cole, Dom, Brandon, a little counterclockwise here, at least for my screen. And Division 1, all right, it's very top heavy this year. We're going to talk about maybe some teams that didn't deserve to be there. We'll talk about that later. But question number 1 for you guys, out of the following top seeds in Division 1, Region 1, this is a 2-part question, so hang with me. Part 1, in Division 1, Region 1, who has the best chance to knock off 2-time defending state champion St. Edwards? Would it be Mentor, Medina, Wadsworth, maybe Camp McKinley, or Cleveland Heights? Part 2 of that question, let's say St. Ed's gets through all of that, which that's a lot. It's a lot. Are they waiting on Olentangy, a team that you guys saw go neck and neck with Medina earlier this season? And if that happens, what happens in that game? Colio, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so first of all, St. Ed's obviously is a school that is everybody's chasing, everybody's looking up to, not only in the region, but across the state in Division 1. I mean, they're 2-time state champs, and obviously they took down Springfield 2 years back-to-back in the state championship game. Now, people might not love when I say this, but St. Ed's might not have the most talented people at the skill position players.
Position. Not this year.
This year. There are better quarterbacks out there. There are better receivers. There's, in general, and this isn't to say they're bad. They're still good players. Obviously, they have to be good to be playing and starting at St. Ed's. But where they make their money is in the trenches. Their offensive line is massive. That's why you have 3 guys who you already know are already going to Big Ten schools. 1 to Michigan, 2 to Ohio State. And then you have a defensive line and a linebacking core that I think is difficult in the trenches as well. It's hard to run on them. They're not afraid to blitz and send the pressure. So in the trenches is where St. Ed's makes their money. That's where they win championships. That's where they won championships the last 2 years too. I just felt like against Springfield in that state championship game, and Vince, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Springfield had every bit as good of people on the outside. It was just in the trenches in that front 7 defensively that won those games for St. Ed's, correct? Both years, agreed. Absolutely. So that's what you're looking at there with that team. They're built for that cold weather, that hard nose when you need to run it on the ground. When you need to be organized, you need to be disciplined, you need to slow down a team. They can do it on both sides of the ball. So the thing is, everybody's chasing them. First part of your question is, who has the best chance of taking them down? Well, obviously, that's a tough task because they certainly have a team that could three-peat. I look at this list, Mentor, of course, didn't actually get to see them in person this season, whereas we had a few times last year, but still a lot of the same faces, still a lot of the same players. Mentor's had their ups and downs, right? They'll play really well one game, and then another game, I think they're down just a little bit. My thing for them is I think if you want to beat St. Ed's, you have to have some explosive plays. I don't know if they have the team that can get them enough explosive plays to take down St. Ed's based on the team that's returned really from last year. So there's my question there with them. For Medina, the big plays aren't a problem for them, right? They're a quick hitter. They can launch the ball down the field type of team. They can score fast. Like a plethora of points will come when you play against Medina. Problem is, defensively, they regressed defensively even a little bit more. They already struggled last year defensively, gave up a ton of points. But this year, in multiple difficult games, Olentangy, Mentor, Cleveland Heights, they couldn't get their defense off of the field. And even when you're scoring, 40, 50 points, you think you'd win a game. But no, sometimes that's not enough because they gave up a ton of points. So there's that concern with Medina. Wadsworth is improved from last year. They're a really solid team. I really liked what we saw in Week 10 against North Royalton. That being said, Wadsworth did lose to Medina earlier in the year. So that kind of at least alters my opinion there, where would Wadsworth be better against St. Ed's or Medina? And because of Medina winning that head-to-head, I would at least give Medina the edge, even though defensively I have the question. Canton-McKinley, let me say this, even though you included them in the list, they got smoked by Massillon, Washington, just this past weekend. I mean, they got throttled in that one. So I think that even though bigger school, typically pretty good, Massillon and St. Ed's played each other tough, and for some reason St. Ed's really struggles with Massillon. But again, I think Canton-McKinley would have the worst shot of this whole list. And then finally, Cleveland Heights. The thing for them is, can they play from behind? If they get behind St. Ed's, would they be able to make a comeback? They're not a team that wants to throw the ball. They want to run the ball. If they can run and get ahead and play from the front, they maybe have a decent shot. Okay. Here's what I say talent-wise, because St. Ed's has plenty of guys who are 4-star recruits, are going to some big schools. I think of this list, the team that has the next best group probably of prospects, of recruits, is Cleveland Heights. So I am going to say that this year of this group, because I have the concerns about the defense of Medina, and like I said, Medina won the head-to-head against Wadsworth, and Mentor, I don't know if they'd have enough big plays. I think Cleveland Heights would stand the best chance against St. Ed's of these teams. Of course, it's a tough task. Like I said, the game plan has to work out perfectly. I think if you're Cleveland Heights, you have to run that ball, establish the run. Probably not going to be as much up the middle as getting around the edge. and hoping that St. Ed's doesn't set the edge that well. And you can get Davis loose. You can get John Gordon Jr. loose. You can get some of those guys loose on the run and play from ahead. And I think that's your best chance. That's the best hope for Cleveland Heights. So I'd give them the slight edge. That being said, am I going to say that I think St. Ed's makes it to the state championship? Yes, I do. I do still think they make it there. I think all these teams are tough teams at the top, but St. Ed's is more well-rounded. They're built for this. They have the experience. So who actually gives them the toughest test, the toughest challenge? In Region 2, that's the same region that Springfield came out of 2 years in a row. The top seed in Region 2 here in Division 1 is Olentangy, of course, who we got to see in that game where they beat Medina. The number 2 seed in that one is Delaware Olentangy Berlin. I think those are probably the two teams that in that region, I think it's either going to be Berlin or it's going to be Olentangy that come out of that. One of those two Olentangy schools at the top 2 spots. But based on what I saw from Olentangy, they have Grunkmeyer, who's an excellent quarterback. They have Jackson Wiley at wide receiver, who's an excellent prospect. You have Gavin Grover at tight end, who's a big player, who's going Division 1 as well. I liked what I saw from them. But where I think that Olentangy could be the potential toughest test for St. Ed's potentially, if those two face each other in the state championship game, is that I have not seen a bigger offensive line this season than Olentangy's offensive line. They were solid, and they also had Gavin Grover blocking for them at the tight end spot. Those 6 guys on the line, they paved the way against Medina. Obviously, different defenses, but I have to say this. I think physically, stature-wise, Olentangy matches up St. Ed's stature-wise better than any of the other schools that I had just listed. So, like I said, in the region, Cleveland Heights may be the team that, if the game plan works out well, could maybe give St. Ed's a test. Assuming that St. Ed's gets all the way through to the state championship game, I would like to see Olentangy be the team up against them there. Those are the two teams coming out and facing each other. I would like to see Olentangy because we got to see them earlier in the season. I'd like to see what they could do. I would say St. Ed's would probably beat them and probably three-peat, but at the same time, I do think at least stature-wise in the town of Grunkmeyer, if they have to throw it, I think Olentangy could maybe be the best shot to take down St. Ed's, but of course that would be much farther down the road in Canton.
Don Clary, fresh from the KISS concert, how do you feel about the teams you've seen this season, and who would have the best chance to top them in Division 1, Region 1, as we spoke about?
Yeah, so the teams that we mainly talked about, Menor, Medina, Wadsworth, Kent McKinley, who I haven't seen in Cleveland Heights, they're all great teams where they're the best players in their communities, right? Kent McKinley, I saw the score from against Massillon the other day. So Kent McKinley's the one team I'm not, it's probably in the bottom of that list. It would really be a huge upset. It's like a 16 seed being a 1 seed in my mind at that point. No disrespect to that program. It's a good program, but I just don't see this year being the year that they can upset a team like Ed's. But I mean, Cole really named it all about these teams and really dissected them. Wadsworth is a good team. I really like their play design, their execution. At the end of the day, I just don't think there's enough. I think if they were in D2, they would have a really good shot of getting to that semifinal round. I just don't think they have the size, quite frankly. I think they have talent. I just don't think they have the size to compete with a team like Ed's in the tackle box. I don't see it possible. I think with a quarterback they have, they could compete with anybody. But at the end of the day, Ed's is just at the top of the table. It's like going against Alabama in your Delaware. It doesn't matter who you are. And then Medina and Menor, these were two teams I was hoping to see them challenge Ed's going into the year. It seems like both teams are really good at certain things, and the things they're not good at you can really dissect them on. We saw Medina really get picked apart this year on things that they weren't great in. When it comes to stopping the run, we saw it against Olentangy. They just couldn't do it. They have size, but that team, that defense, they struggle. And even running the ball at times, they're not built for it. They're built for throwing the ball. If you can slow the clock down on them, which Eds can do, it's a big team that likes to run the ball. It's just not a good matchup. In Menor, they might match up with them style-wise, but at the end of the day, again, they don't have the size. And Cleveland Heights can be the one team where we look at the halftime score and we think, wow, they might have a chance, and then all it'll take is a few bad things to happen for it to kind of go the opposite way. Eds has so much talent that they can fumble the ball, they can throw an interception, they can have a bad punt or a bad field goal, and they can make up for it. But when you're any other team going against Eds, you have little to no mistakes that can be made. So out of those teams, Cleveland Heights can challenge them and take them to the wire. I think this is Ed's region to reach to the top. I think like Cole, the Olentangy Braves is really the team that we've seen. Now, again, there's probably other teams in that region. You mentioned the other Olentangy school that can possibly compete with them. Olentangy, I mean, the prospects that come out of those four schools is absurd. I mean, the amount of kids that play at Ohio State right now or Cincinnati out of the Olentangy school district is insane. But that's no here or there with I think the Braves are just the one team that I've seen that could probably topple them over. I think that would be in the state championship game is where they meet. They have the talent at the wide receiver. No one can really guard Wiley. He's that good of a prospect. If you're a college recruiter, you need to get on it now because that kid has a lot of talent. I mean, Grunkmeyer, come on. Coach Franklin flew on a helicopter to watch him play in a high school game. Kid's good. And similar to Drew Alar, he came out of nowhere. He was on no one's list and ended up being the prospect everyone was dying to hear about. So I think when you have a quarterback like that offensive line is big, it's physical, they can move, they're fast, good with hand placement. They can plug and play any running back in there, and they can get just good work out of them. That defense swarms to the ball. You can put up points on them, but eventually they will adjust with a good coaching staff. Those kids have a good head on their shoulder. That's the one team I could see beating Eds. But again, Eds can have one thing go wrong. It won't phase them. They'll keep on chugging along. I mean, it is a machine there at Eds. So, yeah, the Olentangy Braves really the only team I can see. Cleveland Heights might challenge them, but I don't know if anyone can really topple them this year out of that region.
Don,
well,
something you mentioned. Something you mentioned about Grunkmeyer as well. Mind you, about two and a half weeks ago, he shot up over 100 spots in the rankings nationally as well. He was around 200th and then shot up into the 90s. So what a climb he's had this year. He was already a great talent and a recruit commit going to Penn State. And then mid-season, he just shoots up in the rankings even more because he's having an excellent year. Credit to his team as well, but he's been good himself.
You know who has two thumbs and was the first person to discover Drew Eller? Never forget watching that kid as a sophomore and saying to myself, he's got it. And then as a junior, that was the COVID year. So Medina went 3-3, and I remember I had him and Luke Hensley on my show back when we used to do that Player Spotlight podcast. And I talked with Drew, and I was not off the phone with Drew for 30 seconds, and he was texting me the names of teammates that he wanted interviewed. We ended up interviewing half of the Medina team. That right there at 16 years old, that kid was doing that. That right there has made him a winner. Brandon, the team that I believe could beat St. Ed's has not been mentioned yet, so I'm very curious to hear your take on all this.
I'm probably going to disappoint you then too, Vince. So first of all, just to touch on Olentangy one last time, that Olentangy team that we saw, I think can beat anybody. I'm not saying it's likely that they beat Eds, but not only is that team filled with talent, they had Grunkmeyer against Medina, and they never even really had to take him off ice, right? They came in with a game plan. They're not looking to force any kind of player into the spotlight. They're not looking to force any kind of specific offense. They did a really good job of adjusting. And at the end of the day, I think that's your only chance to beat Eds, right? Because not only are you going up against, immense physical talent with that team, again, an offensive line that rivals some in college as far as size and just weight and height go. I think they've got the best shot out of anybody that we've talked about. And as we go into now, the five that we kind of mentioned, St. Ed's is going to be a heavy favorite against any of these teams, right? We're not looking at a case where Ed should really even necessarily be worried about any of these teams. It seems like once again, there's a giant gap. And unless Massillon suddenly jumps to Division I overnight, I don't think they really have a ton to worry about, at least coming out of Division I. So as I take a look at everything, first off, I don't think you're going to beat St. Ed's by playing their same exact game. And I don't think teams that are well balanced and don't really focus in on one thing really well while still being stout on the other side of the ball are going to have too much of a chance. So I look at teams like, again, Menor, Wadsworth, as good as they were when we watched them, Canton, McKinley. I think all of them are out because, again, the style of play, I feel like you're just going to try to go strength against strength with St. Ed's, and that's just not going to work out in that case. So that leaves us then with Medina and Cleveland Heights. Medina, as fun as they are, St. Ed's has been the boogeyman. Alar couldn't do it. Stoddard struggled last year playing St. Ed's, if I remember correctly. If they played in the play, I could be wrong about that. That was the year before. I apologize, but
yeah,
they didn't. But it's okay. Go ahead. Menor knocked off Medina last year.
That's right. Either way,
called by Don Clary.
There you go. Either way, Medina seems to just kind of lose it when they get to the playoffs because they're going against really well-coached teams. And as good as they are on the offensive side of the ball, that defense is way too much of a liability. And that's not something that you can run into St. Ed's and think that you're going to be able to come out and be all right. It's a great strength, that offense, but you've at least got to be stout on the other side, like I mentioned. And I just do not see that with Medina. And then that leaves us to Cleveland Heights. And the reason I like Cleveland Heights, obviously they went 10-1. They're very deserving of that second spot in Division I. They kind of took their lumps early in the year. They lost. The only game they lost was to an out-of-state opponent from New Jersey. And then they had that game against Brunswick that we called, they struggled a little bit as well. But what I, again, saw in that game, and one of the reasons that I like Olentangy, is that they adjust. They can play to their opponent. They want to run the ball. That's their preference. They want to slow the game down, which can work against St. Ed's. We kind of saw that blueprint with Hoban last week, even though they didn't end up finishing and executing. They can do that. But then if they have to throw the ball, they still very much have the ability to. I mean, we saw some crazy games with them later on in the year where they just started putting up points like crazy. 41 on Strongsville, 42 on Solon, 62 against Medina. Again, you let Medina put up 52 and you're still able to come out with a win when you're a team that generally likes to slow down and run the ball. Again, that just shows me that you can adjust. They're finishing hot as well. Again, they had games to end the year, Medina, Euclid, Shaker Heights. Shaker Heights was another great team, and they were able to take care of business in all of those. So I think they're coming in at top form right now. So I believe at the end of this, it's going to be St. Ed's and Cleveland Heights coming out of the division or fighting for that final spot out of the division. That said, again, St. Ed's, I think, is just too physical of a team for Cleveland Heights. I don't necessarily agree that they have to get ahead in order to win that game. I think the offense is talented enough to stay with Ed's and to be able to come behind from a little bit. Obviously, if Ed starts blowing them out early, I think it could definitely get out of hand. But again, none of these teams, again, I'm super confident going up against Ed's whatsoever. But if anyone's got a shot at it, I think it's Cleveland Heights.
And fans, you could reach Brandon Soeder at It's Soeder Not Pop on Twitter. Medina fans, make sure you go ahead and let Brandon know that you heard his podcast tonight. Listen, guys, all joking aside.
I mean, we all said Cleveland Heights.
Say something.
We all said Cleveland Heights, so don't throw Brandon under the bus. That's all.
And St. Ed's is in my backyard. All right, I'm not super worried. All right, I've got protection over here. We're good.
Here's the thing. I feel the same way about Medina's defense. It's an obvious liability. Mm-hmm. Go figure. Cole said something at the top here that I completely agree with, which you guys hear a lot in our show on for Climate Tech Inc., the NFL prediction show. One thing we and him talk about, sometimes it can take an individual player to beat a team, which is crazy because football really is the ultimate team sport. However, Cole said something earlier in the show where he said Springfield, there were spots on Springfield that were actually better than St. Ed's, but St. Ed's was better in the trenches, and that's very, very true.
Mm-hmm.
There's two different players that you guys saw this year that I was beyond impressed with. Number one, this most past weekend, Stack from Wadsworth. Kid's unbelievable. Real deal. I'm going to butcher the name like I always do, but, him and Figure, I want to say it is.
Correct.
The two of them together are phenomenal. Okay, so you have a double threat there. Number two, Marquise Davis is the best football player in Ohio this year, bar none. I know we just got done talking about Stoddard and Gruckmeyer and everybody else. He's the best player in Ohio this year. My humble opinion. The kid's unbelievable. You guys just happen to see it on an off night. For whatever it was, when Cleveland Heights played Brunswick, they just weren't themselves that night. They still won comfortably in the second half. But I honestly think he's the type of player that could beat St. Ed's. He's the kind of guy who could have some unbelievable game no one sees coming, a 300-yarder, 4-touchdown effort. He's the kind of kid who could do it. I'm going to mention him one more time, Drew Eller. Drew Eller in 2020, again, the COVID year. I watched Drew back-to-back weeks take out St. Ignatius and take out St. Ed's in back-to-back weeks, and that was a year where St. Ignatius was very, very good. So sometimes you see a player go next level. He's right in front of your face all season, but then he makes that jump. So that's what I see happening there. I'm not going to sit here week one. There's a lot of things that still have to happen before we get that game, but I would not be shocked by any stretch for Wadsworth to do it and stun everybody. I love that Wadsworth team. Or, like I said, Cleveland Heights with Davis. That being said, I personally only saw Menor once this year. I saw him play St. Ignatius, and they lost. So that alone kind of left me a little bit iffy there. Medina, it's one of those things for me. I know a lot of Medina parents. I'm friends with a large portion of that community. It would be great to see him finally do it, but we shall see. It is only weekend number one. A lot of fun conversation there. Now, gentlemen, I've said it every year since 2021 when they expanded to 16 teams a region. And I'll say it again. It should be either 6 or 8 teams a region. I think 16 teams in a region is absolutely absurd. These last 3 years have been a joke. Sitting there in the press box last year, watching St. Ignatius destroy John Marshall 35-0 in the first quarter, and then Chico, who's probably the classiest human being of all time, taking a knee the rest of the game. So St. Ignatius wouldn't score many points on them. It's just insane, right? We're going to see it again this year. We got Medina playing John Marshall in the first round. We have Strongsville going out to Canton McKinley. We have Elyria playing St. Ed's. Midview is going out. They have a very tough test on the road at Highland. There's these games week one where I don't know what we're going to see, but it's probably not going to be very pretty. Brunswick made the playoffs as well. However, Brunswick, I will say this, if you want to talk about strength of schedule, I don't think anybody on earth had a tougher schedule than Brunswick. Mm-hmm. Brandon, we're going to start with you. A lot of people feel I'm wrong. If I put this on social media right now, people are going to tell, hey, Vince McKee, shut up. But I don't think there should be 16 teams a region. I think it's asinine and absurd, and it needs to end. Brandon?
Now, if we're talking about the NFL or college, this is a much easier conversation because we're talking about the quality of the product, the quality of the game that we're watching. It's a little bit more of a difficult conversation when we're talking about, high school kids. Again, a lot of which, like Dom talked about a lot on our last podcast, are not going to get a chance to play football again, are not going to get a chance to witness that kind of playoff atmosphere, regardless of if they're a heavy underdog. That has been stuck the entire podcast. But anyway, so it's difficult because you want every kid to have that opportunity. You don't want to take games away from these kids that have worked all season and have busted their butts and have played good games and played great strength of schedule to get where they are. That said, I think we need to dial it back a little bit. I don't think we need to go all the way to 6 or 8, like Vince is saying, because then you are going to miss out on teams like Brunswick, who tested themselves with a crazy strength of schedule for the first 5-6 weeks of the season and then caught fire at the end and are really coming into form, as the playoffs are coming around. They at least have a shot here to kind of make some noise. That said, you have 1-win teams getting in now. You've got Euclid, you've got Elyria, St. Ignatius getting in with 1 win. The program has a down year and they're still rewarded by, getting into the playoffs and still being there and being represented. I think ultimately what needs to happen is we go down to 12. cut just a few of those 1-win teams that have just been outmatched all year from kind of getting into that conversation. You give the top 4 teams a bye, give them a chance to get ready. It's kind of like we're talking about with the college football playoff in the coming years. Let the other 8 play, and then move up from there. So reward those teams for, continuing to push throughout the end of the season and building up their record and building a good strength of schedule to get there, still using those computer rankings, but just trimming off the fat a tiny bit, because you don't want to take away opportunities from these kids, but you also don't want teams just being completely outclassed on the field. It's not good for anybody at that point.
Dahmer.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a tricky question because you say get rid of, the 6 team per region, and then you're telling kids we don't want to watch you ever play football again. There's a moral problem to it, right? And I think the problem is that you have a kid. Let's talk about Brunswick. We talked about how tough that team is and how deserving they are to kind of have an easier schedule so you can get some wins. Essentially saying, hey, you shouldn't be allowed to play football anymore now that we're about to hit November. I'm not a fan of it. I will say that I don't like the way that it's set up, where you guys just have the state playoffs here. Pennsylvania did this when I was in high school, where they just started letting anybody in. I mean, we played teams where they had no wins and they just wanted their kids to play one more game. And the reason why it's more kind of acceptable the way it is at PA, you have your district playoffs, then you have state playoffs. The winner of your district moves on to the state playoffs. So you don't have a small school from Mercer County, where I'm from, playing against some of the toughest teams in the Pittsburgh League. It's just they set it up so that doesn't happen. In Cleveland, it's just the way that everything's drawn up. It's a free for all, and you have these schools that they do have 1 win, and instead of kind of playing in what would be a district and kind of where there's lines where they would be able to kind of play schools that they kind of played all year to see who moves on to the state playoffs, it's, hey, you didn't win a game all year. Play Eds. Like, it's an extreme thing. I think it needs to be reconstructed. I don't mind 16 teams. I just think it needs to be reconstructed in how the playoffs are here in Ohio. And then again, you could say, oh, well, the regions are these districts that you're explaining, but it's not, because when you get out of your region, you end up in the semifinals right after. In PA, you win your district, you have 4 rounds to go, depending where you're at. So I think it needs to be reconstructed. Again, I don't mind Euclid getting in. I mean, they've had a tough season with things out of their control. I don't mind Brunswick playing football again. I'm fine with kids playing football. I just think the system needs to change just a little bit, just so these kids aren't playing Eds after having a 1-win season. And maybe there should be a win limit. Maybe it should be 3-4 wins. I'd be fine with that, but I'm not fine with, let's just get rid of these teams, because then you're going to have teams that have 6 wins and they somehow don't get in, or 7 wins or winning record, or maybe they had a tough schedule like Brunswick and they go 500. They don't get to go to the playoffs because we just reconstructed it and got rid of a spot that they would be in originally. So I just think we kind of really need to revisit it and kind of grow from the system we have now.
Well, that's
Well,
where
Dom,
I feel like. Oh, sorry, Vince.
Oh, I was going to say, Dom, I have good news for you. The OHSAA does do that. And in fact, it's with a sport that we cover here all the time. It's called girls basketball. It's exactly what they do.
It is what they do.
Yeah, they take the worst schools with the worst records. They have them knock each other out, and then they go kind of for the real thing. So they do that with girls basketball. Brandon, go ahead. Sorry, buddy.
No, all I was going to say is that's, again, where the bye system kind of works to your advantage. So you're not having these lower level schools go in and play a team like Eds and just be completely outmatched. Like you said, you have them play a little bit lower level talent, at least give them an opportunity to go out there and compete without them just, again, having them go up against a much more physically superior team, to the point where we're even talking about health and safety issues. If we're sending a 1 or 0 win team out to play a team like Massillon, like Eds. But point being, I think the bye system is the best kind of way to go there, because you're rewarding those teams that dominate all year, while then also still giving the teams that are kind of brought in at the end of the playoffs a chance to do something.
Cool.
Well, I'm going to say if we want to fix this, we have to fix the entire construction of how the OHSAA does things.
I knew he was going with this.
We're going to take the 7 divisions and make it 4 divisions of public schools and 3 divisions of private schools.
Yes! You are the smartest man alive.
St. Ed's, Massillon, Washington, Hoban, those schools should be in Division 1 of private schools. And then you have to then go size-wise, okay? Maybe the 2nd division, you hit your Lake Catholic in some of those schools as well that are kind of in the middle. And then you hit the smallest ones at the bottom. We have enough private schools here in Ohio that we can make 3 divisions. So then that leaves us with 4 divisions of public schools. You have to go back and change all of that and restructure that in order to make the playoffs more fair, right? Because the private schools, they're every bit of deserving to get their shot at a state championship. And of course, a lot of these private schools, they're winning state championships. But at the same time, you have these public schools that they can't recruit. They can't quite go toe-to-toe. So our first segment was talking about who could possibly knock off St. Ed's. Well, some of those schools are really good, and they could maybe, if they play a nearly perfect game, potentially knock off St. Ed's. But can they recruit like St. Ed's really can and pull people in from surrounding areas? No, they can't. So they don't fully match up there. The thing is let the teams that can go toe-to-toe go toe-to-toe. And then let the public schools who don't have the same luxuries be able to compete, okay? Don't let the private schools take state championships away from public schools. Don't cross everything together where it makes it difficult. And then, what is a recruiting violation? What's not a recruiting violation? That will solve our issues. Of course, until the OHSAA figures that out, they screw their heads on straight, right? And they actually strip the whole thing down and restructure the whole thing. It's going to take work, but it needs to be done. Until they actually do that, this problem's not necessarily going to be resolved. So if we're going to stay in the current format with divisions, I'm fine with how this is structured, because even though I'd love to see a team needing 5 wins and be at least 500 to make it in the postseason, there are teams that have loaded schedules like Brunswick, who's actually a pretty good team, a sound tackling team. That's why they played Cleveland Heights so well, as they kept everything in front of them. They set the edge well. They were a good team. They just went through 3 powerhouses in Division 2, and they couldn't win those games to start the year. And then their conference was ridiculously tough. So Brunswick, some other teams like that, they do deserve to be in there. So current format, I'm fine with how it is with the 16 teams, but you have to go to the root of the situation, and that's separating the private schools and separating the public schools.
Well, I'm not going to argue with you on that. And what's funny is we sat there together in Canton last couple of years, and that conversation's come up about that separation. And what I thought was amazing was the Springfield head coach, and I forget his name, so I apologize. But the first year, he didn't really say much in the post-game press conference. He kept it pretty respectable. Mm-hmm. Last year, he went off.
Yeah.
And pretty much, remember that, Cole? Like, pretty much exactly what Cole just said. And a lot of people were stunned by that. But I remember me and Cole, talking with each other the next morning, and we're like, you know what? The guy's kind of right. And yeah. He said a lot of good things there. I'm gonna, this is a tough one for me because I've went through this. I did not play football at North Olmsted. However, I had a lot of friends who did, who were on the team. And I will never forget my junior year of high school when North Olmsted, I kid you not, guys, they were really good. They were 8-1, and their only loss was to Strongsville. And this was a year where Strongsville was a powerhouse. It's nothing like it is today. So again, this is the fall of 1998, and I want to explain this to you guys. So they're 8-1, and they're going to play 9-0 Avon Lake week 10 of the season. North Olmsted had a win to get in, and they didn't. They lost to Avon Lake on the last play of the game. Now, you take a school like that and a team like that and a year like that all those years ago, they're 8-2, and that's my last memory of high school football before I started Keon Sports and all the other stuff that we do today. And I think of those kids, I'm like, that group of friends that I had back then, they deserved it to play playoff football and maybe see what November football was all about. Because, again, this was when the playoffs didn't even start until November. Everything was a little bit different. But back then, that's how crazy this was. Back then, it was 4 teams a region. Think about that for a second. So it was like you needed to either go undefeated or lose one game to get in. So that was crazy. Okay, that shouldn't have been the case. But I'll give you guys, because y'all love Brunswick. You know, I mean, you saw them. They were one of your, a team that you guys saw a lot. So I'll give you this. If you're Ethan Roxandage and your last game, you just had a walk-off miracle win against Strongsville, your ultimate rival. Brunswick versus Strongsville. It's a huge, the rival, Boston Road, all that stuff, right? You want that to be your final memory of high school football, or do you want your final memory getting destroyed by Wadsworth this coming weekend? Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll pull off a stunner. Who knows? But those things to me make a little bit more sense. I also, call me selfish, but I do wish it was down to 8 teams a region again, simply because the playoff or the regular season wouldn't start as early as it does. I hate the fact, on a personal note, I hate the fact that the regular season every year now starts on the same weekend as my wedding anniversary and my older daughter's birthday. Like, that stinks. So, on a personal note, if I could have that one more week of summer, that would be splendid. So a lot of things to talk about there. Guys, as we move on, question number 3 here. We want to thank all our fans for joining us here on Key on Sports, keyonsports.com, the little company that came out of a Zoom recorder, and look where we're at. It's an amazing feeling. Now, the one kind I just talked about them, North Olmsted used to play in the SWC. When I went to high school, they actually played in SWC all the way through 2019. The SWC is my favorite conference. I don't think that's a mystery to anybody. I've covered them every year. I live in all these SWC cities are near me, same with the GLC. So here's the thing, guys. This year, above all else, you could have made a case in 2020 that Avon Lake was better. Maybe in 2021, not really. 2022, nope. Olmsted Falls gave him a run. In 2023, Avon was untouchable. Smoked everybody they played in conference. Glenville gave them one hell of a game. Obviously, week 3 out of conference. Besides that, they were a buzzsaw. Now, that being said, I'm bringing this question up to you guys because you each, and so did I for most of these teams, but you each called a game where all 4 of these schools played in it. And we'll start with Cole here in a second. So, with Avon being number 1, clear-cut favorite, whatever. Who's number 2? Berea-Midpark, Avon Lake, Olmsted Falls, or a fully healthy North Ridgeville team? I want you to think about that for a second, and I'll give you my answer before I go to Cole. I still think, even if North Ridgeville is 100% healthy, coming in, with their quarterback ready to go, guns a-blazing, I still truly believe Berea-Midpark's better. I think this is the best team Berea-Midpark has had in years. One of their their losses this year coming to Avon, coming to Cleveland Heights, coming to, I want to say, Nordonia. Another team that's had a buzzsaw, right? But I actually believe Berea-Midpark is loaded. They got a kid named Austin Clay. You don't want to kick to him. Think about Desmond Howard in the 90s. You punt the ball to Austin Clay, he's going to take it to the house every time. So I'm going with Berea-Midpark, and that's no knock on anybody else. I love what North Ridgeville's doing. I really, truly do. But in that matchup, I would say Berea-Midpark. However, I'm not nearly as qualified to talk about this as you guys are because you actually broadcasted all these teams. Cole, take it away. Who is number 2 in the SWC?
Yeah, so first of all, obviously, of this group, Avon's the only team that the 3 of us who are on the broadcast didn't get to see throughout this season. But relying on, the highlight videos, written recap articles, and everything, I can still at least see what Avon looks like. And obviously, we're all in unison that they're number 1. And going back to last year, actually, Vince and I are on the same page that if Toledo Central Catholic doesn't beat Avon last year, yes, Avon could have stood toe-to-toe with that Hoban team and potentially won that game. But it didn't pan out for them. And they're probably just as good this year as they were last year. So everybody's going to have their eyes on Avon. But we're not going to talk about Avon right now because everybody knows that was the team in the SWC. That's a team to watch out for in Region 6. Now, of those other teams in the SWC, there's a lot of good talent there. Obviously, you said we have to consider North Ridgeville fully healthy. So North Ridgeville first couple weeks of the season, that first half of the season. And the interesting thing with this is I think if all these teams, all four of these teams play each other, 10 times, it's one of those where a team wins 7, another team wins 3, 5-5. I could see a lot of a toss up, right? Depending upon location, depending upon just kind of how the game starts, right? I think there's a lot that could go into this because I think they're actually kind of tightly lumped. Okay. So I'm going to try to differentiate this and say to my best ability of what I think here with this. So I'm going to start off by saying North Ridgeville, beginning of the year, Cole Miller surprised this week 1 being that starting quarterback. It was a little bit shaky, but showed some promise in that first week. And then as the season went on, again, he started to settle in. Obviously, Charlie Steinmetz and some of the guys they want to get the football to, Barnhart, the running back, they are good when the football is in their hands. I liked what they had on the front of their line defensively. Compton in the secondary, he was good as well. So they had plenty of good pieces. They looked very talented. They looked like that team that could hover right around that second, third spot until, like I said, some injuries kind of slowed them down. Now, we got to see a lot of these other teams more mid to later in the season, unlike North Ridgeville when they were at their full health earlier in the year. When we saw Avon Lake and Olmsted Falls go up against each other, Avon Lake was getting top 10 votes at that time because of their record. Olmsted Falls at home, I mean, that was a game where they were just going back and forth, and it was like a heavyweight slugfest that Dom and I were talking about there. I know Darian Jackson was filling in for us that week and got to join us for that week, and he had a good time. He had seen Avon Lake in person, and we had not yet. So Dom and I were impressed with what we saw offensively, but Olmsted Falls, every single time they answered, once they finally got a stop, Olmsted Falls just continued to pour it on and were dominant. And then we got to see Berea-Midpark against Midview, and they were dominant. Now, they had some issues when they kind of got into no man's land and, fourth down, they got stopped on some fourth downs and probably didn't put up as many points in that game as what they could have, but they performed very well. I have to say this, though. Of course, we didn't cover that game. We weren't there to watch it, but Berea-Midpark then beat Olmsted Falls in the battle for the Bagley Cup. My thing is this, and as much as this is tight, I'm going to say that my number 2 team comes down to Olmsted Falls and Berea-Midpark. Between those two, I think if they play each other head to head, I'm going to say they might split 5-5. But the reason why I'm going to give this one team the edge is just because of the size that they have. They have multiple 3-star prospects who, again, are getting looks at the college level. Again, they have the talent there. But not only do they have those big tight ends, defensive ends, and I like the way that they played and how that team's constructed. But you mentioned Austin Clay at wide receiver. And of course, I'm going with the Berea-Midpark tight ends. I'm going to actually say them at number 2 this year. Clay's a playmaker when the ball's in his hands. Unfortunately, got banged up in that Midview game, so didn't play the whole time. But he's a threat as a wide receiver. He's a threat as a returner. I like how he performs at that position. And then they have some decent running backs as well. Silva was excellent in the game that we saw. So I'm going to say that Berea-Midpark is that number 2 team. Unfortunate for them that they're such a big school that they have to be in Division 1 rather than Division 2, because they might be able to make a deeper run in the region if it's Division 2. And I'll get the pleasure of seeing them on Friday against Massillon Jackson. Of course, looking forward to that 7-10 matchup. So because of that, Olmsted Falls then slots in at 3. And then I'm going to say this. I would say that the later stages of the year, Avon Lake would be 4 and North Ridgeville would be 5. But if we're saying fully healthy, and you're putting that restriction on me there, Vince, then a fully healthy North Ridgeville this year would have been 4, and the Shoremen would have been that 5th team.
I agree. And I want to say 2 things. Devin Zahersky is another kid you want to watch out for at Berea-Midpark. And Maddox Swisher as well. Maddox Swisher is the ultimate team player. This is a guy who had played quarterback the first 2 weeks of the season. John, Coach Hunick told me, hey, we're going to move him to safety. That's what they did. It's worked out for the best. They brought in young Daniel Bowser, and Danny Bowser has stood up to the pressure. He's played phenomenal. But again, Maddox Swisher is a two-way player. He does a lot on 2-point conversions for the Titans. They convert a lot of those 2-point conversions with him as quarterback. You see Sahursky lined up in a Wildcat sometimes. They do a lot of things, and I'm sure Coach Hunick's ready to strangle me if I give away any more of their plays, so I'll stop. But it is just it's a very powerful offense that you want to watch out for. And the difference this year with Berea-Midpark, because in all the years of Keon Sports, and even before I created Keon Sports, when I covered high school football for somebody else, I've actually covered more Berea-Midpark than any other school, believe it or not. So I've seen for years the Trevor Bazinski years where Berea-Midpark had a phenomenal offense, no defense. This year with Noah Silva, Austin Clay, a lot of these guys can play both ways, especially Devin Zahursky. They're just much, much, much better. Dom, Dom, I know you because you've already said, hey, put me in North Ridgeville for the playoffs. I've already slid you in that side of the bracket. But just definitely curious to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, a name that I don't think was brought up for Berea-Midpark real quick is Andrew Hanchuk.
Yep.
He is a senior defensive end, wears number 0. Big kid. I'll tell you what, I don't know how you block him. A body like that, physical hands, you can't really get inside of his chest. I don't know how you're supposed to block him. He's going to cause headaches for a lot of people. Maybe you hear his name in a list very soon. I'm not the messenger, but hey,
yeah.
No, but as we're gonna find out here in a few weeks, Berea-Midpark, they have some players I'm a big fan of. But you're right, North Ridgeville has probably been my one of my favorite teams to follow the past 2 years. Next to Brunswick and, of course, Homestead Falls. I love that community. Love the grit that's on that field. But Berea-Midpark is the best team besides Avon out of the SWC. I don't think there's really a doubt about it. I think, and you mentioned the quarterback play has gotten better, but they had those questions at the beginning of the year. It's really the one thing that held them back. Now, was it Bowers or Bowser? Bowser. He's gotten better throughout the year. I know Berea-Midpark, there were a few, or against Midview, there were a few throws he missed. You could tell that he's still adjusting, still improving. Again, we haven't seen him since. But if he can continue to improve, they will move up a few rounds in the playoffs, and it might be a team that we're circling that could cause a little bit more damage than people thought. Now, I think they're the number 2. I disagree with Homestead Falls being that third team overall behind Avon and Berea-Midpark. Again, I love Homestead Falls. I love the community. I don't think that they're the third best team. I think it's North Ridgeville. I know with all the injuries they've struggled, but with Steinmetz and Barnhart, I don't know how you don't put them there.
Again, we're going off the assumption that North Ridgeville stays healthy through this process. But starting kind of at the bottom, Avon Lake just got away from their brand of football this year. The defense was not that stout, great dominant defense that we're used to, winning games 14-0, 21-7. It just wasn't really there this year. And then on top of that, you couldn't have asked for a worse end of the season. I mean, you lose to Olmsted Falls, Ridgeville, and Avon 3 weeks in a row. So you talk about looking at a team, you got to look at them for the entire year and how they develop, how they adjust, how they finish. And Avon Lake just had the worst finish out of anybody, even with the majority of their team still healthy. After that, Olmsted Falls, I struggled with a little bit because, 7-3 record, overall, a very, very good season as usual. Again, saw them maybe get a little bit away from their traditional style of football, running the ball down your throat. And being a kind of a chew the clock control kind of a team. But again, it comes down to how they finished up and then just the strength of schedule I wasn't incredibly impressed with. They have 7 wins, but it's over teams like Solon, Canfield, Elyria, Amherst. And it seemed like in the big games when it mattered, they just weren't showing up as much. Lost to North Ridgeville, obviously to Avon. Losing to Berea-Midpark. The Midview game was even a little bit closer than it probably should have been. So again, the strength of schedule just not there for Olmsted Falls. I think the record isn't quite as impressive as it looks necessarily on paper. So then we get to the last two, and it's the same two. It seems like everyone's kind of juggling between for the most part. That's North Ridgeville and Berea-Midpark. If we're going under the assumption that North Ridgeville stays healthy, I don't think they lose to Midview with a full team. I think the Berea-Midpark game, even if they lose that, it's a closer match and it's a more even matchup than that 31-7 that we ended up seeing. And then they still were able to take care of business against Amherst, and they still beat Avon Lake with this team. So then you're talking about, an 8-2 team, potentially a 9-1 team going into the playoffs for North Ridgeville. And overall, just a great team this year. Again, Miller was phenomenal at quarterback, even though he was a surprise start. Took his growing pains, but I mean, he just kept progressing like crazy throughout the year. And then to have that kind of stunted by injury and everything else, it just hurt to watch. But not only that, the defense was stout all year. We saw that defensive line was dominant in the games that we saw them play. They were wreaking havoc against teams that, at the beginning of the year, we didn't necessarily think they should be hanging with, and kind of surprised us. And unlike last year, where they started off hot and then fell off a cliff, they still were able to maintain and play decent football despite the fact that they were dealing with all the injuries that they were. So again, with that projection, I think North Ridgeville was the second best team in the SWC. If we're going off practical, what's going to happen next week, kind of a look at things, it's Berea-Midpark. Again, the talent is there. Like Vince mentioned, the defense for Berea-Midpark is not something we've seen all the way back to when I was still going to school at Berea. That just didn't really exist. So to finally have a good defense to pair with the explosive offensive weapons that they have, give them a good opportunity to kind of make a run here in the playoffs. And even though I think North Ridgeville is the better team overall with all healthy players, because of the situation they're in, honestly, I kind of have them on upset watch going in against Valley Forge. I mean, it's tough the way they had to kind of tail off at the end of the season. Forge really had to fight their way in, and they're hungry. They're ready to go.
They're good.
So it feels weird to say that, the second best team in the SWC may lose in the first round of their division. But like you said, Berea-Midpark's playing in Division 1. They've got the talent to compete there. I think they've got a really good chance against Massillon Jackson, coming up in the first week of the playoffs. So again, right now, Berea-Midpark is the better team. If everything had played out fair and all teams coming out healthy, I think North Ridgeville proved that they were the second best in the SWC this year.
So I want to say this too, a bit of a preview. I covered Valley Forge a couple times this year, and Dahmer, do not be stunned if there is a major upset on Friday night, and maybe it's not as big as everybody's going to think. A couple kids you want to watch out for: Ben Farson, dynamite running back; Nick Mankins. Farson and Mankins, really one of the best 1-2 punches at running back I've seen in a long time. And those Valley Forge Patriots, as Brandon just said, it was only 2 weeks ago they beat, at the time, an undefeated Buckeye team. So don't sleep on Valley Forge is all I'll say on that one. Guys, we're going to begin to wrap things up. One of the more exciting things we're doing this year, and very, very rarely do I get a text message that almost makes me drop my phone in excitement. But I've always said Keon Sports was built on intuition and built on ambition and built on maybe thinking outside of the box. With that being said, Dominic Clary with the idea of a lifetime. You older folks out there, people closer to my age, I'm sure you know the All Madden team, the All Madden Bus, years and years and years ago when they would have that show. It was incredible. Dom, I'm going to shut up and let you take it away. Tell us about your idea and tell us what we can expect.
Yeah, so first, real quick, I'm going to make this short on the explanation of why I even got this idea. I was BW. Believe it or not, I got this from this idea for BW is where it stemmed from. They tweeted out the anniversary of when Pat Summerall and John Madden broadcasted
Yeah.
BW against a team that's not important. And so I remember watching that game. Yeah, Wittenberg. And I remember when they did the 150th anniversary of college football, they had a ESPN special on this because it was so big. It was during a lockout year. It was the scab season for the NFL. So they decided to do this, the cover D3 games all on a Sunday, and it really got really helped people get over the fact there was no football on Sunday that year for a good portion of it. Well, John Madden used to go in and watch film with the players, and I always thought, I'm like, I want to do that. Like, I know I'm not John Madden, but I want to. What can I do that John Madden did? How can I take an idea from one of the greatest color commentators of all time that's done the role that I'm currently doing here? And then I remember watching documentary, the All Madden team. I can do that, right? He was able to, again, watch the whole NFL. I can't watch every team that we cover when it comes to article. Why not just do the teams that we talk about or the teams that we broadcast, right? I watch those players. I have a game right now on YouTube. I've nonstop been rewatching all these games, trying to make sure I don't miss anything. The old grit team, it's not the players that put up the best statistics. It's not the players that are getting the D1 offers. It's not the kids that are constantly getting posted on Twitter. It's a kid that's on that 2-win team, but he's putting up a stat line of a lifetime. He goes in, he works day in and day out. He continues to grind because, he loves competing. He has a love for his community, a love for his teammates. Yes, they have 2 wins, 3 wins, 4 wins. They're not Eds, they're not Maslin, they're not Avon, but he cares. He's a player that I want in the foxhole with me. Again, the foxhole of football, not a real foxhole, but these are the players that when it's a hot summer day in that weight room, who do I want to be lifting with? If I'm a coach, I'm putting my depth chart together. Who do I want running down on special teams? Who's that player I'm going to put on the edge to get a sack, to get the tackle, to make the game-winning block, to make the game-winning catch? Because they're gritty. They're that tough. That's what this list is all about. Now, people who aren't on this list, that doesn't mean that you aren't gritty. Promise me. I've put at least 4 names in every position, and I've been moving them around, deleting them, putting them back in. It's been hard. I mean, and you guys can attest to it. This week so far, and it's Monday, I've kept texting you. I don't know who to put here. Who do I put over this and that? It's tough, and these teams, they don't make it easy, man. And so, again, I'm going to end my tangent here, but there were a lot of teams, and we only saw a little bit of a few of these great teams. There's some teams that don't have a lot of wins, so of course, you don't want that to be in consideration. Oh, their team wasn't very good. No, that's not important. I'm focused on how tough a player is. If I want them on my team, if I want to coach them, that's the type of player that we're looking for here. But I'll end my tangent. That's the All Grit team, and can I announce when we
Yes.
plan on releasing it?
Yes.
All right, November 1st. Mark your calendars. All my calendars are marked. All 12 of them. They're all marked for November 1st. Yep, the Brandon just did it there. I think I'm probably going to announce some stuff that we're going to do. There's definitely going to be an article. I think we might feature it on the show, I believe, Vince.
Yep.
I'm really excited. We're hopefully next year we'll make this an even bigger deal. We have some ideas going around.
Yeah.
But this year we'll just have it here on the podcast. We'll have an article. Hopefully be able to reach out to some players and coaches to get that going.
And folks, it's not too late. Legit, email me, coachfin14@yahoo.com, vince.mckee@keonsports.com, or give me a call. You get a hold of me. It's going to be incredible. We're looking to get some t-shirts made up, hopefully, and find a place to host it. Let's have a party next year. Let's really go huge with this. I think it's an amazing idea. Want to toss this out there too. A disclaimer, and it's always going to have these legal disclaimers. Again, as Dom touched on, this is only for the teams that played in the 10 games we broadcasted. Please understand this. You will not see any Avon players or St. Ed's players. It's only for the teams that were on the broadcast. So just want to make sure we hit that home. I can already see the emails, text messages, and complaints coming in. So just want to double check on that one. Number 2, I think it's a fantastic idea. I think I'm going to bring back a podcast of my own, the Keon Sports High School Football Year in Review. I did it in 2019. It got a ton of hits. This is way back when we were on Podbean. Would love to do it again. And that's strictly, I just talk about my week-to-week of the two teams I saw that week, or if I did a doubleheader, I talk about those games and who stood out to me. I love doing that. I think you've inspired me to bring that back as well. So a lot of fun things going on. Brandon Soeder, as we begin to wrap things up tonight.
Hold on. And number 3, when does the all-Italian team come out, Dom? Have you looked into Heritage yet?
Well, so October 31st that will come out. It's that's the very last day of Italian Heritage Month. Vince, happy Italian Heritage Month. We'll have the all Italian team. Please, if you want to be in consideration for this award, send your birth certificates in, name and dates of when your family came through Ellis Island. Thank you.
All right, now that the show's completely off the rails, I got to shout out Brandon Soeder for this. I had forgotten about this. This is legit, folks. This was probably about 6 weeks ago. I'm sitting at work. Brandon sends me a text message, and he says, "Do you like lasagna?" Or I think he said something like, maybe a stupid question, "Do you like lasagna?" And I'm like, well, hell yeah, right? So I work about an hour away in my day job. Not going to tell you where, but about an hour away. So I get home, and what's the first thing I smell but piping hot lasagna? Brandon made it. It was out of this world good. All respect to my grandma up there in heaven, who I miss every day. It was grandma level good. So somebody just mention the Italian. I forgot, Brad. I've been meaning to shout you out for like 6 weeks. That lasagna was unreal. I don't know what you're doing to broadcasting because you should be a chef. Like, holy smokes.
Well, I'll just go ahead and accept my honorary Italian statehood, Vince.
You deserve it. Absolutely. But hey, as we wrap things up, I want to throw this out there. My favorite moment every year. Okay. I always have a ton of favorite moments. One moment that will always stand out to me, and parents, I'm sure you'll understand this, is when my two daughters, Maggie and Madeline, cheerlead at the varsity game. Once a year they get to go down there at halftime. It's a very magical moment. I absolutely love when they do that. So there's that moment, and there's a ton of others, but I could always know where I was, what game it was, who played who, all of that. Brandon, you, however, though, being on that broadcast, it's next level because there's the excitement in your voice and Cole's voice and Dom's voice and just so many things that you guys get to see and talk about and witness and so on and so on. It could be a halftime show guest like Brad Mendelar or Mr. Wilson. There's a million different things. But for you, your first year on the broadcast team, not just being in the booth, but on the team and really a voice that everybody loved, what was your favorite moment this year that you got to experience?
Yeah, so to give a little context to this, we got to go all the way back to the beginning of the season, back to July, and a little bit of a peek behind the curtain. Before the season starts, a few weeks before, or a month before, we all go over to Vince's place. He buys us dinner. It's wonderful. And then we lock ourselves in a war room and argue about who we need to be covering for the year.
It is a war room.
And credit to Cole and Vince. They do a really good job of prepping that before we even get there and coming with suggestions. And it's always very good conversation. And it's tough to really narrow down the teams that we're going to go and cover. There's a lot of factors that go into it. But point being, there's a ton of work that goes into that. And we kind of meticulously craft the schedule that we're going to be covering this year. And it's all games that we think are going to be phenomenal. Great matchups, great rivalries, whatever it might be. So we get the schedule all set. It's been promoted, everything. And we're 5 weeks into the season, and we're getting ready for, I don't even remember what the matchup was at this point. I know it involves, Strongsville and
probably Cleveland Heights or something. I don't even remember.
Medina.
Medina, yeah. So that part's not even important, but we find out like the Wednesday before that we can't do that game. There was a scheduling mix up with, space in the booth, whatever. That part doesn't matter. I'm not holding anything against anybody. But we had to scramble, obviously. And Holy Name was, courteous enough to take us in at the last second to get a space in their press box for their game against Normandy. And this is not a game we would have necessarily had on the schedule at the beginning of the year. Both teams were struggling a little bit at that point. Holy Name kind of surged at the end of the year, but I think they had one win between the two of them coming into that match.
Correct.
And it was the best game that we had called all year. It had everything to it. It was a close game. There's several lead changes as the game was ending. Every time you thought it was over, all of a sudden, here comes Normandy storming down the field, losing on a last second 2-point conversion. But we got to see Noah Gray in that game, who's a player that would not have gotten a lot of attention from us but ended up being one of the better quarterbacks that we saw this year on a one-win Normandy team. Just kind of put the team on his back and keep him in it. That game had, quite literally everything. We had not only a blast watching it, but I just remember the energy was kept up the entire time. Obviously it's unavoidable to get blowouts every once in a while. And, the broadcast kind of goes off on its own, but that game was just nonstop, edge of your seat fun. And it's something that we would not have gotten to experience had things not shaken out the way that they did. So, sometimes, weird things happen for a reason. I'm very glad that we got to go and cover that game. Covered actually a couple great games in that stadium out in North Royalton, but yeah, just Holy Name and Normandy getting put in there at the last second was definitely the highlight of the year.
So we're going to go to Dom and Cole next week and the following week. We plan on doing at least 3 or 4 shows, and I want to space this out. Each week, give somebody else an opportunity to speak clearly about what their favorite moment of the broadcast season was. And, Brandon is 100% correct. And, me looking as a fan and just watching you guys each week, I enjoyed the heck out of it. And like you said, something about just being in that North Royalton Stadium somehow brings out magical finishes. I mean, I want to be shocked if one of you guys ends up choosing the walk-off field goal by Ridgeville. There's a lot of cool stuff this season. The atmosphere that you guys had in Medina week 2, holy smokes. You could feel it through the screen is all I'll say. I've gone back and watched that game, half a dozen times at least from pillar to post. Just amazing. So guys, we're going to wrap this up. We're going to let Cole start us off, and then we'll go around the board one more time before we take it home. But hey, I cannot stand Halloween. One of my least favorite holidays. I've never been a big Halloween fan, but I love candy. Anybody who knows me would probably know that any game I cover, if you look in my book bag, there's at least a few pieces of candy sitting in there. I am a candy junkie. Having 2 kids who go out every year for candy makes it even worse because Halloween is just the whole month of November. I'm battling diabetes. I mean, it's that bad, right? So the month of November is just nonstop sugar. And then Brandon, I'm not teasing you there. It's a tasteless joke. So Cole, feel free to edit it out of there. But anyways, candy in itself, I love. But hey, we know every single year you get, as a kid, you look in the, for me, it was always my pillowcase. And I don't know if that's an Italian thing, if Dom did that too, but I'd always bring my pillowcase, load it up, and I'd go for the Twizzlers and all this great candy, right? But there'd also be a lot of crap you didn't want, like these things called sixlets, which were like little mini chocolate balls. I think they're called sixlets. They were terrible. You had the nut o honey, which was just like a little piece of taffy, but it was like honey peanut butter flavored. That got tossed. That was gross. And then you had the milk dud stuck to the little box. So just all kinds of stuff in there that wasn't really the best, that I always thought, at least. And I love candy. But Cole, what was that one piece of candy that you absolutely loved every year? You couldn't wait. It was usually the first thing that got ate before everything else. And what was that one piece of candy that you just pulled out and just immediately in the trash can?
Well, milk duds are good. I'm going to say that there. I like milk duds. But now I have to say, though, when it comes to candy, not just Halloween candy in general, gummy candy is like a go-to for me. So for me, trolley sour gummy worms, nothing tops that in my opinion. You get a fresh bag of trolley sour gummy worms, and I am all in for that. Again, it's my favorite movie theater candy. Again, Halloween time, we're talking about candy. I'd have to go with that. Like I said, like a lot of candies that are gummy, like Haribo gummy bears or, Lifesaver gummies. All those things I enjoy, but nothing tops a good bag, a fresh bag where it's not hard, it's very chewy, but of the sour gummy worms. So I'm going to go with that. I'm going to say least favorite candy, and those sixlets are bad as well, but I'm going to say that Whoppers. I never liked Whoppers, hated getting those. It felt like it was a common thing in variety packs. So I feel like when you got Whoppers, you got a ton of them, right? Where I feel like when people would kind of give you a handful of candy, you end up, it's like Whopper, 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 and you're tossing it to the side. It's like there's a ton of them, right? So the worst thing is, not only are they bad in the first place, but you got a ton of them as a kid because they were always in those variety packs. So Whoppers I could have done away with.
So I got to throw this out there before we go to Brandon. just a quick story about Cole. I love gummies too. They're my favorite by far. I mean, gummy worms, gummy bears, Swedish fish, and that's why I'm going to go with the story very quickly here. So obviously, guys, these are three of my best friends in the whole wide world. I talk to them pretty much every day. And Cole, we're sitting there in Canton, and I think I had some Swedish fish, and you're like, the ones I like best are the mixed color ones, and the different variety, not just the all red ones. Like, man, I've never seen those. You know what I mean? I kid you not. So this is a state championship Saturday afternoon, and we're sitting there having this, ridiculously stupid conversation, right? So a couple days later, I go to cover Magnificat at St. Joe's, and that basketball game's huge. That's like Heads of Nations football. It's massive. This place is packed, right? And people are taking pictures of the action and everything else. I look over, and what am I taking a picture of? A big old bag of Swedish fish. And you know why? Because someone had brought a big bag of Swedish fish, all different colors, the blue and red kind, and then the mixed berry and all that, right? And I'm sitting here distracting myself for the game for 10 seconds to take a picture of a bag of Swedish fish and just send it to Cole because I just thought it was too funny. I'm like, I've never seen this. I don't know what he's talking about. Sure enough, they were right there. Brandon.
Well, the old traditional thing, by the way, though, Vince, was that it was yellow, green, orange, and red in a box. And that was the typical one that you would see with the mixed colors. It was those four. For some reason, it's so hard to find that box of those four flavors, those four colors anymore. It feels like it's just gone away and it's just all the red. So interesting enough that they're updating bags too. And you saw the one that has blue and all those things because they're making some changes. But I just remember as a kid, I always liked the boxes there of Swedish fish that had the red, the yellow, the orange, and in the green. So yeah, I don't know. But for some reason, you came across a box that had actually the bag that had all the different colors there.
Well, it's like a car, right? You never see your car until you buy it. So you buy a car, and all of a sudden you see that same car that you're driving all over the road. Case in point, again, to take you guys behind the show, I changed up my diet a little bit this year, but the one thing I do every Friday night, you can count on it. I get home from the game, the first thing I do is I pour myself a cup of coffee, and as soon as that cup of coffee is done, I go to the Rockstar. Well, I've always hated Rockstar because I feel like it's rocket fuel. I hate it. It gives me heartburn. I don't like the taste. But about 6 months ago, my younger daughter, Madeline, said, "Hey, Daddy, what's this drink?" They have a thing called now Fruit Punch Rockstar. This stuff's great. So I never saw it before. Now I see it everywhere I go. Gas stations, Target, whatever. So you can count on it every Friday night. Fruit Punch Rockstar energy drink. It gets me to my 3 a.m. bedtime on Friday nights. It's electric. So, Brandon?
First off, Fruit Punch Rockstar literally got me through college, so I appreciate the sentiment there. So good. Also, just want to shout out North Royalton for actually having sour gummy candy, as part of the spread for everyone up in the media box at that last game. I know you guys took advantage of that too, but all that said, oh yeah. As the resident diabetic, I'm here to tell you there is no such thing as bad candy. And then there's Necco wafers, which are drywall pretending to be candy, right? Everything else is fair game. So again, there's not candy I will not eat outside of that, and maybe black licorice. Again, the gummy candies are great. Swedish fish, I also did not know there was multicolored Swedish fish, and I love those things. As far as my favorite candy goes, this changed a little bit as I got older. When I was younger, it was Butterfinger. Just chocolate, crispy peanut butter, like everything in it was just phenomenal. Now, I don't know if I've picked up a Butterfinger in the last 10 years because it's not worth me having to, take a pickaxe and get to get everything out of my teeth. It's just not worth it anymore. It's not fun. As a kid, you don't care, right? You leave that in your mouth all day and you're fine. So it's kind of shifted to, Twix is now my personal favorite. I mean, it's so solid. Good. Cookie, chocolate, caramel. But again, there is no such thing as bad candy. And maybe it's because I didn't eat a ton of it growing up for obvious reasons. But even bad candy is still candy, except, again, like I said, Necco wafers, which I don't even know if we want to call candy. And a special shout out to Smarties as well. Those are still in the rotation today.
Are they really?
Absolutely.
Oh, I hate Smart. Nerds and Smarties to me are two of the most popular candies that I do not like. Also, peanut M&Ms. I love regular M&Ms, so just the pure chocolate ones. I'll pound those like there's no tomorrow. You put a peanut in there, want nothing to do with it. But that's interesting about the Smarties, and it doesn't shock me. They're very popular.
As they should be.
Dahmer.
I'm a big Skittle guy.
Yes.
Before every basketball game from 7th grade until the time that I quit, my junior year, I had a bag of Skittles before every game, bag of sour Skittles before every game. I don't know why. I don't know how it started. Probably something with Marshawn Lynch, honestly. But he was the most popular
Hennessy.
athlete growing up.
That's Hennessy.
He was eating the Skittles during games. I'm like, if Marshawn Lynch could do it, why not Dom Clary? So, listen, if you give me a bag of Skittles, especially if it's sour Skittles or tropical Skittles, that's a plus. That was always a plus for me. If you give me the mini bag of Skittles, I always had a grudge against you as a child. Wasn't a fan of like the little bags. I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like,
I mean,
take 2 bites of Skittles and then what? Want more? I don't know. It never made sense to me. I mean, Whoppers are like, I always liked them, but it was always like the ones that were always left, It's like, I'd sort all the candy out and I'd eat all the Butterfingers and the Milky Ways and the Twix and the Snicker, all the cool stuff. And then there's just 100 Whoppers just in the bottom of the bag.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's just disappointing. It's not that like I ate them. Trust me, I ate them, but they were just there, and you guys talked about Swedish Fish, right? Is that what I just heard?
Yeah.
As a football team in high school, it was a tradition that all of our coach had a big bag of Swedish Fish. And we went into our meeting before we would start warm-ups and everything, getting dressed. Everyone would get a handful of Swedish, would pass the bag around, even on the bus, would pass the bag of Swedish Fish. Everyone had to eat a handful of Swedish Fish before game. That was a huge tradition in football. It was, if we didn't do it, we were going to lose. We had to do it. I don't know where it started. There was always one of the parents that had a sign that said like just a picture of Swedish Fish. I don't know where it came from, but Swedish Fish always has a special place in my heart as well.
Now, isn't there a college team that does that now,
Yeah.
where they have somebody just roaming the sideline with gummy worms?
Yes, Rice. They have somebody on staff who literally just carries a bag of gummy worms around and then passes it out to players throughout the game to get sugars back in their system.
I want that job. Man.